G'day guys, timer is on. Hope you are enjoying your run if that's what you're listening to. And I would like to know if you are listening to it on your run or if you're maybe listening to it while you're driving or what you're doing. And would be keen to hear if people are watching the videos. I am posting the video podcast that you can see if you're on Spotify. Otherwise, the videos are also on the Facebook group, the STEPN Injury Prevention Facebook group, and now also on YouTube. So I'm keen to hear where people are consuming this the most, because I have had a couple of requests for visual elements to the show. So images or videos around maybe some running technique or factors like that. But my vision for this was that people would listen to it while running, or at least mostly listen to this, where if I'm optimizing for audio, then I'd be leaving images out, because otherwise you feel like you're missing out by not seeing what's going on screen. So yeah, just keen to hear where people are mostly listening to this. So head across to the STEPN Injury Prevention Facebook group, where I've got a poll up and running for hearing back from where you guys are listening. Just want to make it as valuable and as useful as possible, so we'll do what most people want. So today I'm going to be talking about pain science. I just got off recording an hour and 45 minute podcast with a guy over in Ireland who listened to my previous podcast that I did with the gym I worked at in Sydney. So just been talking about lots of different things over that hour and 45. And one topic that came up, which was really quite useful for his audience, and I've got feedback in previous podcasts that I've done to be useful, is talking about pain science. So while this might not seem directly related to, it's not running technique or running programming, having a good understanding of pain and how it gets, how your body and brain experiences pain, I think is really useful for thinking about injuries, but also thinking about, sort of exercise is hard and pushing yourself can be a painful experience. So I think really understanding what pain is and is very useful for everyone. So I'll start off by saying that it kind of wasn't what I expected when I started physiotherapy. I'd sort of done a bit of education around it, but really not very much. And when during my Doctor of Physio degree, they did this very early on, a whole week on pain science, and then tried to basically, with everything else that we learnt, teach it really in that context of pain science, because I think people just have such a misunderstanding, and rightly so, because it's just not taught, what pain means. So basically, you don't have pain nerves in your body. You have a series of different nerves that send different signal back to your brain via your spinal cord. So you've got pressure and touch sensations. You've got temperature. You've got different surfaces. So rough surfaces, spiky, soft, and then you've also got feedback around chemical changes that are picking up cell damage. Now, I know I did talk a little bit about this in the second episode, where I talked a bit more about what pain that you can push through a little bit more, and what you should be more concerned about, and the concept of irritability. But I thought I'd just do a deeper dive into basically how these nerves pick up this information, and then it gets processed or modulated, so changed at your spinal cord level. So basically the information before it goes up the superhighway that is your spinal cord will be influenced by your metabolic state. So basically, if you're in a very high adrenaline state, so adrenaline is a hormone that's released when we need massive action, so like your fight or flight sort of situation. So that's you've got a lot of sympathetic nervous system drive. So sympathetic nervous system is that fight or flight system. It's basically trying to give you superpowers to be able to either fight off what is scaring you or run away really fast without worrying about much else. So in the context of maybe a running injury where you've got, so I had, when I did my marathon recently, my left ring toe, so my second from pinky toe, the toenail came off. Well, it didn't come off, it just got like mushed into a state of the nail bed pretty much being destroyed, and then it fell off about 3 weeks later. And after the marathon, it was incredibly painful, and I really like it hurt to put a shoe on. But during the marathon, I really didn't notice it. And so to give you that context, so basically if we think about that particular situation, we've had the nerves that pick up cellular damage have sent up signal from my foot. And then in the kind of current metabolic state of that marathon, basically I would be in a fairly high adrenal state, lots of these kind of stress hormones that are, I guess, giving me extra energy and power. And then, so they'd be modulating, so turning the pain, turning the information sent to my brain down. So then that information goes up the superhighway, that is your spinal cord, and enters into your brain. Then at your brain, you've got that information then gets filtered through thoughts, mood, belief, context, and then you have an output that is pain. So it's not that there's a one-to-one stimulation of these nerves or of these pain nerves, because we don't have pain nerves, we have information. And then you get an output of pain. You have that modulation at the spinal cord level, and then you have this processing in your brain, which then gives you a pain experience. So where this is really relevant, so in this running example where my toenails been pretty destroyed, that isn't my biggest concern at the time, because I had very sore legs. It was a very challenging run. I was getting significant sort of quad and some knee discomfort, where basically like the last part of a marathon, it's such a long run. 42 Ks is a really long way to run. I've had so many patients who've been marathon runners, like a marathon runner who does a 2-hour 14 marathon, absolutely amazing, and some other ultra marathon running patients who run 24-hour races, 500 or across countries, like one lady who ran across Iceland, which is 570 Ks. So it's sort of been normalized, the idea that 42 Ks is a very far way to run, but turns out it really is very painful. So basically this toenail, in the context of the threat to my body that was this running stress, was was basically the signal was turned down, and I really didn't experience any pain from it at the time, because the context of the race, where basically I had this other significant leg pain, and I was really focused on completing the race. I hadn't seen it, so without seeing it, that something had happened there, I wasn't really aware of it. There's a really great story of someone who was working in a construction site and had they stepped on a nail. So there was a big nail sticking up from the wood in the construction site, and this nail went all the way through the sole of the person's shoe, through their foot, and came sticking out the top of their shoe. They were in absolute agony, freaking out, screaming in pain. And then they were taken to, basically a crew got there, and like an ambulance crew, and they really carefully cut away the shoe, and each sort of movement was excruciatingly painful. And then they finally got rid of the shoe, cut the top of the shoe away, and they realized that the nail had actually gone in between the toes of the person. It hadn't actually pierced the foot, it had gone between the toes. But for that person's brain, they would have seen this, giant nail going through their foot. They would have had information coming from their feet in the form of, the pressure and the touch sensation of the nail against the skin, and then that context of, knowing just how horrible it would be to be impaled on a nail, and having that visual feedback of it coming through, that basically turned up that person's brain pain, or turned up that information and expressed it as a pain experience so intensely that they were screaming in pain. And it wasn't until that visual feedback and that understanding of the actual situation changed, and then that person felt very sheepish and no longer experienced any foot pain. So that's just a good little anecdote that's really popular in teaching with pain science, because I think it's very relatable, where it's often when we haven't seen something that we don't really sense it. And you see athletes who have a really bad injury and they're totally fine, and then they look at their broken leg and then start to scream in agony. So again, this thoughts, mood, belief, context is so key to understanding how pain works. And again, that's not to say that pain is something you can think your way out of. It's not saying that it's all in your head. It's just to give that understanding that there's the timer, 10 minutes is up. I'll just wrap this up. But it's the reason why this is really useful is it can basically inform how you approach things like chronic pain, because pain is so useful in acute stages. So if you had a traumatic injury, like with runners, if you twist your ankle and tear one of the ligaments that I've talked about in the past, or you have a muscle tear of your hamstring, it's really useful to get that signal from your brain to it's basically picked up a perceived threat. It wants you to limit activities that are going to make that more painful, make potentially cause more damage. So that pain in the short term is really useful. But where it is not so useful is when it really sticks around and becomes a long-term kind of more chronic issue. And so how this is kind of relevant is if you basically if you're really aware of this pain, you're thinking about this, I don't know, foot or knee pain constantly, and everything you try and do is impacted by this knee pain, and you've known other people who've had knee replacements, and you've Googled things, and you think that you've got a bone-on-bone meniscal damage, then that can basically increase the amount of your brain that is taken up with this signal from your knee, so that any sort of stimulation of your knee, whether that's walking or even touching your knee, can you basically start to listen to too much of that signal. So with the way that we get past this is not just trying to think your way out of it, or you're not going to just hear this and suddenly everything won't just be suddenly fine. But where we can really help is by the way that you teach your brain to basically have less perceived threat around an injury is by making it trust you through consistent action. So by consistently building up your training tolerance, gradually building up your capacity by building up your strength, your balance, having an adequate level of mobility, taking your body through range, doing something that's fun and enjoyable and outside like running or walking is a great way of then building up a more positive association with movement and loading of your knee or whatever injury. And that is how people will get past chronic pain. So that's hopefully, this is a really hard topic to talk about in 10 minutes because there is so much to it. And if you are interested in learning more about this, do let me know. I can go into different aspects of it. Sorry if I'm sounding a bit less eloquent than usual. I've just done an hour and 45 on another podcast and finished a long day of work, and it's getting quite late here. So bit of a struggle, but doing the daily episodes. So hopefully, you've got something out of today. And any follow-up questions are very much appreciated, because I do want to make this as valuable for you guys as possible. So knowing how to direct that via your questions is the way to go. So if you would like to ask a question, head across to the STEPN Injury Prevention Facebook page. Join the group. Sorry, not page, group. So join the group. I've got a few polls and Q&A kind of question posts that you can answer them on. Otherwise, just start a new comment and let me know what you think. Again, hopefully you guys are finding this valuable. If you are, sending some, again, because I'm making this all for free, which I'm totally happy to do. I love sharing this stuff with you guys, but to try and make it, I guess, viable for me to do this longer term, some kind of financial reward would be really nice. No one's done it yet, but that's totally fine. So I've got my Solana wallet address, and if you earn a couple of GST today, consider sending one my way. That would be very much appreciated. All right, guys, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.